Good morning. Well, when we talk about commons, one of the questions, I guess, is where are these funny things like commons being understood and where are they being handled in whatever way, if it's to be handled at all? And we inevitably we come up to the United Nations as one international body which is simply existing. But it was created in 1944 for different purposes. It was created to avoid world wars. That has worked. It has not worked to avoid every war, but the United Nations are there. And if they would not exist, we would probably have to reinvent them. And now the problem is that if we want to change something in the United Nations, this is quite difficult because they're very structured in the way they are. It's a club of states. The states feel more or less happy in this organization. It's not a club of people, and it's certainly not a club which is predominantly organized to do work in clarifying commons when they are not evident like air. And a lot of these things have to be clarified and regulated, and this is not being done. There is an institution in United Nations called ECOSOC, Economic and Social Council, which originally was supposed to be stronger when it was created in 1944, but then it fell down in view of the necessities of avoiding a third world war. ECOSOC still exists. I have myself, like many of you probably, these little plastic sheets which allows us to be in a consultative status with ECOSOC to go in the United Nations, which I got in 2000 after thinking, believing that one can do something there. Well, I was disappointed. It's an illusion to come into the United Nations as a civil society person and change the world. You can get in, learn, listen, and talk to people, but really, there's no power. I mean, even if you don't want power, if you just want some influence somehow, it's very difficult. So this is also the opinion of a number of people who are partly here and partly distributed in the world in trying to change things in our world. And in common, we all believe in common to reach something positive in the view of these commons and in our world structure. Something in the United Nations has to be changed. I had a real vision about the United Nations, which I propagated after carefully checking it out for many years in seminars in the World Forum, in the World Social Forum, in Porto Alegre, later in Africa and so on. And recently, 2 years ago, I degraded my own vision to utopia. It just is not sufficient to declare a vision, even if it's realistic, to change something in the United Nations. One has to go about it in a managerial, more serious way. Why managerial? Because I didn't say who I was. It's not so important in this context, but it maybe explains you why I'm working the way I'm working. I'm basically a business person, simply a a producer of artist colors, why not say so, and a management teacher originally. And through this, you work a little bit more systematic. And to approach United Nations work didn't come by coincidence, because I started out with very simple work for children with a own little foundation 25, 26 years ago. And in doing work for children, early childhood education, together with this gentleman, now Montessori president here, we do Montessori work in poor countries like in Haiti. But in doing this, you inevitably learn about the things which do not work on the international scene. It opens your eyes. If you work for something concrete in projects, it simply opens your eyes, it did mine at least, for what is not working in the world. And to draw up a vision, it's fun, but it's not enough. And visions are always fun, but in this case, it was deceiving. And to reclassify my own vision to utopia was a self-convincing thing which was necessary. And I have my vision with me. I will distribute it to those who come to the workshop and even to those who want to go to a different workshop, like music, which is beautiful too. And my workshop is not beautiful. It involves work. I want you to add your brains to certain questions, not yet the questions, they're coming. Well, this is already, you went too far, it doesn't matter. the workshop goal is a concept based on cooperation in the field of qualified global civil society with governments who initiated the Dumbarton Oaks Conference. That was in 1944. That is the basic goal of this workshop, but not to find any content. In an hour or so, we cannot find content to renew the world. That's impossible. That is just asking too much. And we can find solutions for a decent progress, which goes beyond a simple vision, which is something more concrete and practical. We can discuss, and we should discuss if possible, what concrete steps, in your view, are acceptable on the basis of my suggestion of some concrete steps. And now, let me see. We can go one further here. I don't like this thing myself because I always get confused with pushing buttons here. Okay, where are we? That's the workshop goal. Yes, and there are workshop questions which are in the foreground of my asking you, please, to add your brains and knowledges to essential questions on the process of this idea to reach a renewal of the United Nations, particularly of ECOSOC, but not limiting itself of ECOSOC, and not limiting ourselves necessarily to anything which happens right now in the United Nations. A creative process is something which has to be independent, basically, from what is existing, but it can refer to what is existing to see what doesn't work. So we shouldn't block ourselves in just looking at what works legally right now. And what gives me courage to attack such a thing at all? Civil society has, in multiple cases, made fantastic suggestions. And 2 weeks ago, on the 12th of September, for the first time, a very significant thing happened. A number of organizations worldwide who simply deal with reforming the United Nations system and the world community systems. They assembled under the name of Vatun. Did you hear about that? Who heard about that? It's new. It was new to me too. It's very new. It's just a very new groupment of people who are before, since some time, dealt only with this question. And all these groups, larger groups, assembled in Mexico City on the 12th of September for the very first conference of that type. Things are moving in the world to get changes moving towards a new, better United Nations working. Not to find a new United Nations. That would be illusion again and would be utopia again. But for thinking process, we should liberate ourselves from what is existing, but finally it has to work with the United Nations anyway.